My daughter was dying, but the alien cure demanded a price too deadly to pay. Jace Carver had one mission: save his 8-year-old daughter, Mia, as she slipped closer to death in his arms aboard a crumbling ship hurtling through the cold void of space. A forgotten planet called Zynara. 7 whispered promises of salvation. Glowing mushrooms that could rebuild her fading cells and pull her back from the brink. But when Jace set foot on that crimson, dust-choked wasteland, he didn't just find hope. He stumbled into Zynara, an alien beauty with luminous skin and eyes like molten fire, as mesmerizing as she was lethal. She held the key to Mia's survival, but the cost she demanded wasn't just a handful of mushrooms. It was something darker, something far more dangerous, a bargain that could trap them both on that desolate rock forever. Or worse. Could Jace risk everything to save his little girl? Or would he fall prey to a deal even human stubbornness couldn't outrun? Stick around. The next part unveils the shocking secret waiting in the shadows. Hit that subscribe button on my YouTube channel now, so you don't miss a single twist in this wild ride. Jace Carver wasn't a hero. He wasn't even a particularly good pilot. If you ask the docking logs at Nexus Station, 3 scratched hulls and 1 very pissed-off cargo drone could testify to that. But he was a dad, and that was the only job that mattered right now. The stellar nomad, his beat-up freighter, hummed through the black void of space, a patchwork of rust and duct tape that somehow still flew. Inside, the air smelled of recycled oxygen and regret. Jace sat in the cockpit, one hand on the throttle, the other drumming nervously against the cracked dashboard. His eyes flicked to the rearview screen, where a tiny figure lay curled up in the medbay. Mia, his 8-year-old daughter, looked like a ghost under the dim blue glow of the life support unit. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, her dark hair matted against a sweaty forehead. She'd been fine yesterday, laughing, telling him about the constellations she'd memorized from an old hollow book. Now she could barely breathe, her chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven gasps. Jace clenched his jaw so hard his teeth ached. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to her. Not after everything. 6 months ago, he'd taken a sketchy job hauling reactor cores through the asteroid belt. The pay was good. Too good, really, and he should have known better. Halfway through the run, one of the cores blew, bathing the Nomad in a wave of radiation before he could jettison it. He'd thought they'd dodged the worst of it. Mia had seemed fine, until she wasn't. Dad! Her voice was a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. Jace spun his chair around, forcing a grin that felt like it might crack his face in half. "Right here, kiddo," he said, sliding out of the cockpit and kneeling beside her cot. Her small hand reached for his, cold and trembling. He wrapped his fingers around hers, trying not to notice how light she felt, like a bird with hollow bones. "Mom always said you're too stubborn to lose," Mia murmured, her half-closed eyes struggling to focus on him. Jace's throat tightened. He could still hear Lena's voice saying it, sharp and teasing, back when they were a family of 3. Before the mining accident took her and left him with a ship, a kid, and a lifetime of what-ifs. He forced a laugh. "Yeah, well, your mom was smarter than me. Guess I've got to prove her right, huh?" Mia tried to smile, but it faded before it could fully form. Her strength was slipping away, and Jace felt it like a punch to the gut. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then stood up, his mind racing. He wasn't losing her. Not today. Not ever. An hour later, the Nomad docked at Nexus Station, a sprawling orbital hub of flickering lights and shady deals. Jace carried Mia through the crowded corridors, her weight barely registering in his arms. The med bay was a sterile box of white walls and buzzing machines. A doctor with a pinched face and a tablet full of bad news met them there. "Cell decay syndrome," the guy said, tapping the screen like it was a death sentence. "Radiation triggered. No cure. We can make her comfortable, but..." "Comfortable?" Jace cut him off, his voice low and dangerous. "She's 8. I'm not here for comfortable. I'm here for a fix." The doctor sighed, adjusting his glasses. "There's nothing in the database. Experimental treatments might buy a week, maybe 2, but Jace slammed his fist into the nearest monitor, shattering the glass. Then your database sucks. Find me something that works, or I'll start breaking more than your toys. Security escorted him out. 5 minutes later, Mia still cradled against his chest. He didn't care. Doctors were useless, overpaid paper pushers with fancy degrees and no guts. He'd figure this out himself. He always did. Back on the Nomad, Jace patched into the station's black market comms, a shadowy network of whispers and half-truths. That's where he found it. A rumor from an old trader named Crix, a guy with one eye and a voice like gravel. Zynara, 7. Crix rasped through the static. Heard of it? Dead planet full of ruins. They say the eternal shrooms grow there. Glowing mushrooms that can rebuild a body from the inside out. Cured a smuggler's kid once, or so the story goes. Jace leaned closer to the comms unit, his pulse kicking up. What's the catch? Crix chuckled, a dry, hacking sound. Catch is, no one comes back from Zynara 7. Something lives there. Alien, nasty, kills anything that moves. They call it the Guardian. You're a dead man if you land. Sounds like my kind of party, Jace muttered, cutting the feed. He glanced at Mia, her breathing shallower now, a faint wheeze escaping her lips. Dead man or not, he didn't have a choice. If there was even a sliver of hope on Zynara 7, he'd take it. He'd flown through asteroid storms, dodged pirate fleets, and once outran a collapsing star just to make a delivery deadline. An alien with a bad attitude? Bring it on. He punched the coordinates into the NAV system, the screen flickering as it locked onto Zynara 7, a red dot on the edge of known space, marked with a skull icon and the words restricted. Biohazard. Perfect. Just as luck. The engines roared to life, and the Nomad lurched forward, pulling away from Nexus Station into the endless black. Hey, Mia, he called over his shoulder, keeping his tone light. You ever wanted to meet an alien? She stirred, her voice a faint thread. Will it be scary? Nah. Jace lied, grinning at her through the cockpit door. Probably just some grumpy glow stick with a superiority complex. I'll charm it into giving us those mushrooms, no problem. Mia's lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. You're silly, Dad. Damn right I am, he said, turning back to the controls. Hang in there, kiddo. We're going on an adventure. The stars streaked past as the Nomad jumped to hyperspace, a blur of light against the void. Jace's hands tightened on the throttle, his mind spinning with half-formed plans and a whole lot of bravado. Zynara 7 was a death trap. Everyone said so. Crix's warning echoed in his head. No one comes back. But Jace wasn't no one. He was a stubborn bastard with a kid who needed him, and that was worth more than any alien horror story. Outside, the universe unfolded in silence, cold and indifferent. Inside, the Nomad rattled like a tin can, carrying its 2 passengers toward a planet that promised miracles, or a grave. Jace didn't know what he'd find on Zynara 7. Mushrooms? Monsters? A quick death in a cloud of toxic dust? Didn't matter. He'd figure out when he got there. He always did. The NAV system beeped, signaling their approach. A red haze filled the viewport. Zynara 7, a ball of rust and ruins spinning in the dark. Jace took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the landing controls. All right, alien asshole, he muttered under his breath. Let's see what you've got. He flicked the descent switch, and the Nomad plunged toward the surface, a speck of defiance against a world that didn't want him there. The ship shuddered as it punched through Zynara 7's atmosphere, a thick soup of red dust and swirling haze that smeared the viewport like blood on a windshield. Jace gripped the controls, muttering a string of curses as the hull groaned under the strain. Come on, you old bucket, he growled. Don't crap out on me now. The Nomad wasn't built for this. Hell, it wasn't built for much beyond hauling scrap and dodging tax drones, but it held together, barely. The ground rushed up to meet him, a jagged sprawl of crimson rock and twisted metal. Zynara 7 looked like a junkyard god had kicked over and left to rot. Towering spires of stone glowed faintly, their surfaces etched with alien runes that pulsed like dying embers. Wreckage littered the landscape, hulks of ships, skeletal machines, things that might have been buildings once. Whatever civilization had lived here was long gone, leaving behind a graveyard wrapped in toxic fog. Jace's scanners beeped wildly, screaming about radiation, low oxygen, and a dozen other ways this place could kill him. He ignored them. Dead planets didn't scare him. Dead daughters did. The Nomad touched down with a bone-rattling thud, kicking up a cloud of dust that swallowed the ship whole. Jace checked the medbay screen. Mia was still breathing, her vitals weak but steady. "Hang tight, kiddo," he said, pulling on his enviro suit. The thing was a patched-up relic, its seals questionable and its HUD flickering, but it'd keep the poison air out. Probably. He grabbed a plasma pistol, more for comfort than utility, and a handheld scanner, then popped the hatch. Stepping onto Zynara, 7 was like walking into a fever dream. The ground crunched under his boots, a mix of brittle stone and something that looked disturbingly like bone. The air shimmered with a faint green tint, heavy and thick, pressing against his suit like wet hands. Visibility was trash, maybe 50 feet before the fog swallowed everything. The scanner pinged, picking up faint biosignatures somewhere ahead. Mushrooms, monsters, or both, Jace muttered, adjusting his grip on the pistol. "Let's roll the dice." He trudged forward, the spires looming overhead like silent sentinels. The silence was the worst part. No wind, no bugs, just a low hum that vibrated in his chest, like the planet itself was breathing. Every few steps, he glanced back at the Nomad, its silhouette fading into the haze. If he lost it, he was screwed. If he didn't find those mushrooms, Mia was screwed. No pressure. The scanner led him to a crevasse in the rock, a jagged wound in the planet's skin that glowed with an eerie light. He peered over the edge, steps, carved into the stone, spiraled down into darkness. "Oh, good," he said to no one. "A creepy alien basement. My favorite." He started down, the glow intensifying with every step. The walls shimmered, slick with moisture, and then he saw them. Eternal shrooms. They clung to the stone like glowing barnacles, pulsing faintly, their caps a soft violet that looked almost alive. Jace's heart leapt. This was it. Mia's ticket back to the land of the living. He reached for one, fingers trembling inside his gloves when the air shifted. A chill ran up his spine, sharp and sudden, like someone had dumped ice down his suit. He spun around, pistol raised, and there she was, tall, slender, and definitely not human. Her skin was translucent, shimmering with a purple sheen, veins glowing faintly beneath the surface. Her hair floated around her head like fiber-optic threads, drifting in a breeze that didn't exist. Eyes like molten amber locked onto him, unblinking, and when she moved, it was too smooth, too fast, like a predator sizing up dinner. Hi," Jace said, lowering the pistol slightly. "You must be the landlord. Nice place. Love the whole death glow vibe." Her voice didn't come from her mouth. It hit him like a wave, echoing inside his skull. "Leave, or your flesh will rot before your next breath." Jace blinked, trying to shake the ringing in his head. Wow, straight to the threats. "No, welcome to Zynara, 7 pamphlet. I'm Hort." He took a step back, keeping her in his sights. "Look, I'm not here to redecorate. I just need those mushrooms. Life or death thing. You get it, right?" She tilted her head, hair rippling like liquid light. "You do not belong here." The words carried a weight that made his knees buckle, but he locked them in place through sheer stubbornness. "Yeah, I get that a lot," he shot back. "But I'm kind of a show-up, uninvited guy. Comes with the job." He edged toward the mushrooms, hoping she'd blink or something. She didn't. Instead, she glided forward, closing the gap in a heartbeat. Jace yelped, stumbling back, and tripped over a rock. He hit the ground hard, suit scraping against stone, and then she was on him. Her hand clamped around his wrist, fingers cold even through the fabric. He braced for the end. Melting skin, boiling blood, whatever Crix's guardian did to trespassers. But nothing happened. No pain, no death, just a weird tingle like static crawling up his arm. He opened his eyes. She was staring at him, those amber orbs wide with something that looked suspiciously like shock. Her skin flickered, the purple fading to a soft pink and the glow in her veins dimmed. "Are you okay there, Glowstick?" Jace asked, still sprawled on the ground. "Because I'm not dead, and you look like you just saw a ghost." She jerked her hand back, floating a step away. "Ow!" The word rattled through his skull, sharp and confused. "My touch is death." Jace flexed his wrist, grinning despite the adrenaline pumping through him. "Guess I'm too dumb to die. Or maybe humans are just built different." He pushed himself up, brushing dust off his suit. "So what's your deal? Guarding mushrooms for fun? Or is this a whole cursed alien gig?" She didn't answer, just stared, her hair coiling tighter around her head. The air hummed louder now, the walls pulsing in sync with her. Jace swallowed, his bravado faltering. "Right. Silent type. Cool. I'll just grab these and go then." He reached for the mushrooms again, half expecting her to lunge. She didn't move, but her eyes followed him, sharp and unreadable. He plucked a shroom from the wall, its glow warming his glove. One down, a few to go, he muttered, tucking it into his pack. "Let's not make this a fight, all right? I'm not here to—" A crack split the air, loud and close. Jay spun, pistol up, but the cave was empty. Just him, the mushrooms, and the alien chick who apparently couldn't kill him. "Perfect," he said, voice tight. "Now I've got free paranoia with my mushrooms. Loving this planet already." Jace shoved the glowing shroom deeper into his pack, eyes darting around the cave. The walls pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat he couldn't quite hear, and the green haze seemed to coil tighter, brushing against his suit like ghostly fingers. Whatever had cracked behind him wasn't showing itself. Not yet, but he'd bet his last credit it wasn't friendly. He glanced at the alien chick, still hovering there, all glowy and menacing. "You got buddies down here, or is that just the planet saying hi?" She didn't answer. Her amber eyes stayed locked on him, unblinking, like she was trying to figure out why he wasn't a puddle of goo on the floor. Jace shifted his weight, pistol still in hand, but pointed low. "Look, I'm not big on standoffs," he said, forcing his voice to stay steady. "How about a deal? I take a couple more of these glowy snacks, you keep doing whatever it is you do, and we call it even. No fas, no mus punto." Her head tilted slightly, hair rippling like liquid starlight. "You do not understand," she said, her voice vibrating through his skull again, sharp enough to make his teeth ache. "These are mine. They sustain me." Jace blinked. "Sustain you? Like what you eat them?" He glanced at the mushrooms, their soft violet glow casting shadows across the cave. "Huh. Gotta say, I pictured you more as a Rip Intruder's apartheid, not a vegan glow stick." She stepped closer, her movements fluid and unervingly silent. Jace tensed, his finger twitching on the trigger, but he didn't shoot. Not yet. Up close, she was even weirder. Her skin shimmered like glass, veins pulsing faintly beneath it, and her eyes seemed to see straight through him, past the suit, past the bravado, right down to the scared shitless guy underneath. "I am Zynara," she said, the name humming in his mind. "This is my prison. The shrooms keep me alive. Without them, I die." "Prison." Jace frowned, lowering the pistol fraction. "Wait, so you're not the landlord? You're the inmate? Who locked you up down here?" She didn't answer, just stared, her expression unreadable. The cave hummed louder, the air growing heavier, pressing against his chest. Jace's HUD flickered, warning him about rising toxin levels. Great. He was stuck in a glowing death trap with a mushroom-hoarding alien who might be having an existential crisis. "All right, Zynara," he said, rolling the name around like it might bite him. "I'm Jace. Nice to meet you, I guess. Here's the thing. My kid's dying back on my ship. Those shrooms? They're her only shot. So how about we share? 50-50. I'm a reasonable guy." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of something. Anger? Curiosity? Flashing through them. "You are a fool," she said, her voice cutting deeper this time, like a blade scraping bone. "There are not enough for two." Jace let out a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah, I hear that a lot. Fool's my middle name. Jace Fool Carver. Rolls off the tongue, right?" He took a cautious step toward the mushrooms, keeping her in his peripheral vision. "But here's the kicker. I don't leave without them." So either you let me grab a few, or we're gonna have a problem. And I'm really hoping it's not the problem kind because I suck at dying. Zynara moved fast. 1 second she was standing there. The next she was on him, a blur of light and shadow. Jace barely had time to yelp before she slammed him against the wall, her hand clamping around his throat. The suit's seals hissed as her fingers dug in, and that tingle from before came back, stronger now, racing up his neck and into his skull. He braced for the end, melting face, exploding lungs, something cinematic, but again, nothing. Just a weird buzz, like his nerves were throwing a party without telling him. She froze, her grip loosening slightly. Her eyes widened, amber glowing brighter, and her skin shifted again, more pink, less purple, like a chameleon caught mid-change. "Ow!" she demanded, her voice a jagged echo in his head. "How are you still alive?" Jace coughed, prying her fingers off his neck. "Beats me, lady," he rasped, rubbing his throat. "Maybe I'm too stubborn to croak. Or maybe you're losing your touch." Pun intended. He flashed a grin, though his heart was hammering loud enough to wake the dead. "Seriously, though, what's with the no-kill vibe? I thought you were supposed to be the big bad guardian." Zynara floated back, her hair coiling tighter, like a snake ready to strike. "I am cursed," she said, the words slower now, almost reluctant. "My body produces toxins. The shrooms neutralize them. Without them, I poison myself. But you—" She stared at her hand, flexing her fingers as if they'd betrayed her. "You do not die." Jace raised an eyebrow, stepping away from the wall. "So, I'm your kryptonite? Sweet. Should I charge by the hour for this? Or—" Another crack echoed through the cave, closer this time, followed by a low growl that made the hairs on his neck stand up. He spun, pistol up, scanning the shadows. "Okay, that's not you, right? Tell me that's not you." Zynara's gaze flicked to the darkness, her posture stiffening. "No," she said, her voice flat. "That is something else." "Fantastic," Jace muttered, backing toward the mushrooms. "Alien roommate drama. Just what I needed." He grabbed another shroom, stuffing it into his pack. "Look, Zynara, I don't know what's going on with your curse or your creepy cave buddies, but I'm not here to play hero. I grabbed these, I saved my kid, I'm gone. Deal." She didn't respond, just watched him with those unnerving eyes. The growl came again, louder, and the ground trembled faintly under his boots. Jace's HUD flashed red, movement detected, big and fast, closing in. "Oh, come on," he groaned. "Can a guy catch a break?" Zynara's voice cut through his panic, sharp and cold. "Run." "Yeah, no kidding," Jace snapped, snagging one more shroom before bolting for the stairs. He glanced back. She was still standing there, a glowing statue in the haze, her hair floating like a halo. "You coming? Or are you going to chat with whatever's about to eat me?" She didn't move, but her eyes followed him, a mix of confusion and something he couldn't place. The growl turned into a roar, shaking the cave, and Jace didn't wait for an answer. He took the steps 2 at a time, his pack bouncing against his back, the shrooms glowing faintly through the fabric. The air thickened as he climbed, the hum growing into a buzz that rattled his teeth. Whatever was down there, it was pissed and fast. He burst out of the crevasse, red dust swirling around him, and sprinted for the Nomad. The ship loomed ahead, a rusty lifeline in the fog. He slammed into the hatch, fumbling with the controls, and threw a look over his shoulder. Nothing yet, just the haze, the spires, and that damn hum. But he felt it, a weight in the air, like the planet itself was holding its breath. Inside, he sealed the hatch and collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. "Well," he panted, pulling the shrooms from his pack. That was fun. He checked the medbay screen. Mia was still there, still fighting. He clutched the mushrooms tighter, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Hang on, kiddo. Daddy's got a glow stick and a plan." Jace muttered, cradling the glowing mushrooms in his gloved hands. The Stellar Nomad's cockpit was quiet now, save for the faint hum of the life support unit keeping Mia stable. He made it back from the cave in one piece, mostly. His enviro suit had a new tear across the chest, his knees ached from that sprint, and his pride was still smarting from getting manhandled by an alien chick who looked like she belonged in a sci-fi fever dream. But he had the shrooms. 3 of them, pulsing faintly in his pack, their violet light casting eerie shadows across the console. He patched Mia's vitals into the ship's med scanner, feeding it a tiny scraping from one of the mushrooms. The screen flickered, then spat out a string of data that might as well have been alien gibberish to him. Cellular regeneration potential. High. It chirped in a robotic voice. Contaminant risk. Unknown. Recommend further analysis. Jace snorted. Yeah, thanks, Doc. Real helpful. He didn't have time for lab coats or test tubes. Mia's breathing was getting shallower by the hour, and those shrooms were her lifeline. Contaminants be damned. But 3 weren't enough. Crix's rumor had been vague. How many did it take to cure a kid? 5? 10? A whole damn handful? And then there was Zynara, the glowy prison chick who apparently needed them to not poison herself to death. Jace ran a hand through his hair, pacing the cramped cockpit. Great, he muttered. I've got a dying kid, a cursed alien, and a grand total of 3 mushrooms. This is why I don't play poker. He glanced out the viewport. Zyra 7's red dust swirled in the haze, the spires glowing like accusatory fingers pointing at the sky. Whatever had roared down in that cave hadn't followed him yet, but the memory of Zynara's stare lingered, sharp and unsettling. She let him go. Why? She could have snapped his neck like a twig, but instead, she just watched. And that whole, "you don't die when I touch you" thing? That was a wrinkle he hadn't signed up for. All right, glow stick, he said, slinging his pack over his shoulder. Round 2. He checked his pistol, grabbed an extra oxygen canister, and headed back out. Mia needed more shrooms, and he wasn't leaving this hellhole until he had them, even if it meant negotiating with a walking biohazard. The trek back to the crevasse was quieter this time, the planet's hum a steady buzz in his ears. No growls, no cracks, just the crunch of his boots on the brittle ground. He slid down the carved steps, the glow of the mushrooms guiding him like a beacon. Zynara was still there, standing exactly where he'd left her, a statue of light and shadow in the greenish fog. Her hair floated lazily now, less coiled, and her skin had a faint pinkish hue, less alien death machine, more weirdly hot space elf. Jace shook his head. Focus, idiot. Hey, Zynara, he called, raising a hand like they were old pals. Miss me? Her amber eyes snapped to him, narrowing slightly. You returned, she said, her voice echoing in his skull, softer this time but still sharp enough to make him wince. Why? Because I'm a glutton for punishment? Jace grinned, stepping closer. Nah, it's the mushrooms. 3's not going to cut it for my kid. Figured I'd swing by, see if we can work something out. He patted his pack. Got these, but I'm guessing you're not thrilled about me playing Mushroom Bandit. Zynara glided forward, stopping a foot away. Up close, she smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet like burnt sugar. Weird. You are a fool, she said, her tone flat. You risk death for scraps. Yeah, well, those scraps are keeping my daughter alive. Jace shot back, meeting her gaze. And you're not exactly swimming in options either, right? You said you need them to survive. So let's talk. What's your deal? She hesitated, her hair rippling as if the question stirred something inside her. I am a remnant, she said finally, the words heavy, created by the ones before. A weapon. My body produces toxins, lethal to all but me. The shrooms cleanse it. Without them, I die from within. Jace whistled low. Damn, that's a raw deal. What did you do to piss off the ones before? Her eyes flickered, a shadow passing through them. I was their guardian. When they fell, I remained. Trapped. She gestured to the cave, the pulsing walls, the fog. This is my cage. Okay, tragic backstory unlocked, Jace said, leaning against a rock. So we've got a cursed alien and a desperate dad. Classic team-up material. How about this? I take what I need from Mia, you keep the rest, and I figure out a way to help you not, self-destruct. Zynara tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle with missing pieces. You cannot help me, she said. No one can. See, that's where you're wrong, Jace said, tapping his chest. Humans? We're stubborn as hell. Built fire, flew to the stars, punched holes in physics just because we could. If there's a way to fix your poison problem, I'll find it. Bet on it. Her lips twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. You are strange, she said, her voice softer now, less cutting. And reckless. Guilty as charged, Jace grinned. So truce? I grab a few more shrooms. You don't choke me out, and we test a theory. He held out his hand, glove off, bare skin exposed. You said I don't die when you touch me. Let's see what happens if we push it. Zynara stared at his hand, then at him, her hair coiling tighter. It is dangerous, she warned. Danger's my middle name, Jace quipped. Well, technically it's Fool, but you get the idea. She hesitated, then reached out, her fingers hovering an inch from his. The air crackled faintly, a static charge building between them. When her skin brushed his, that tingle came back, sharp electric racing up his arm. But no pain, no death, just warmth spreading slow and steady. Zynara gasped, a sound so soft he almost missed it, and her skin shifted again, more pink, less purple, the glow in her veins fading. Whoa, Jace said, flexing his fingers. That's new. You feel that. She pulled back, staring at her hand like it belonged to someone else. The toxins, she murmured, her voice trembling in his mind. They lessen. Jace's grin widened. So I'm your antidote? Hot damn. Should I start a tab or... Another growl rumbled through the cave, low and close, cutting him off. The walls shook, dust raining from the ceiling. Jace spun, pistol up. Okay, seriously, what's with the wildlife down here? Zynara's eyes darkened. It guards the shrooms. Like me. Great, Jace muttered, backing toward her. Guess we're in this together now. Glow stick. He kept his pistol raised, eyes darting through the greenish fog as the growl rolled closer, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through his boots. The cave walls pulsed faster, like a heartbeat on overdrive, and the air thickened, pressing against his suit like a wet blanket. Whatever was coming, it wasn't here for a friendly chat. Jace glanced at Zynara, her amber eyes fixed on the shadows, her posture tense but steady. Any tips on your roommate? He asked, voice tight. Like, does it bite? Or just glare you to death? Zynara's hair rippled, coiling tighter around her head. It is a scavenger, she said, her voice a low hum in his skull. Drawn to the shrooms. It will not stop until it feeds. Fantastic, Jay said, sarcasm dripping. So, it's a mushroom junkie with claws. My kind of party. He scanned the cave, spotting a narrow ledge above the mushroom cluster. All right, new plan. We grab what we can and book it before your pet shows up. Sound good? She didn't respond, just glided toward the mushrooms, her movements smooth and eerily silent. Jace followed, shoving his pistol into its holster. He'd need both hands for this. The shrooms glowed brighter as he approached, their violet light casting long shadows across the slick stone. He plucked 2 more, stuffing them into his pack with the others. 5 down, he muttered. Enough for Mia. Maybe a spare for you. We're golden. A roar split the air, loud enough to make his ears ring. Jay spun, and there it was, a hulking shape emerging from the fog, all jagged edges and glowing eyes. It looked like someone had mashed a lizard, a tank, and a nightmare together, then dipped it in acid green slime. Spikes jutted from its back, dripping with something that hissed when it hit the ground, and its claws gouged deep scars into the stone as it lumbered forward. Oh no. Jace breathed, stumbling back. That's not a scavenger. That's a damn wrecking ball. Zynara moved fast. She darted between Jace and the beast, her hair flaring out like a whip. Go, she snapped, her voice cutting through his skull. Take them and run. Not happening. Jace shot back, yanking his pistol free. I don't ditch people who don't kill me on sight. Call it a personal rule. He fired a plasma bolt, the blue-white streak sizzling through the air. It hit the creature's shoulder, leaving a smoking scorch mark, but the thing barely flinched. It roared again, charging with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for something that size. Jace dove to the side, rolling across the damp stone as a claw swiped where he'd been standing. The impact cracked the wall, sending shards flying. Okay, glow stick, he yelled, scrambling to his feet. You're the expert. How do we not die? Zynara didn't answer with words. She lunged at the beast, her hands glowing faintly as she slammed them into its flank. A pulse of energy rippled out, and the creature staggered, its growl turning into a pained screech. But it wasn't down, far from it. It swung its tail, a spiked club of muscle and bone, and caught her midair. She hit the ground hard, sliding across the stone with a grunt that echoed in Jace's head. Shit! Jace fired again, aiming for its eyes this time. The bolt grazed its face, drawing a snarl, but it bought him a second to sprint to Zynara. He grabbed her arm, hauling her up. You good? Because I'm not carrying you out of here. She shook him off, standing with a grace that shouldn't have been possible after that hit. I do not need your help, she said, her voice sharp despite the faint tremor in it. Sure you don't, Jace muttered, turning back to the beast. It was circling now, eyes locked on the mushrooms, drool dripping from its jagged maw. Any bright ideas? Or do we just keep shooting and hoping? Zynara's gaze flicked to his hand, the one she'd touched earlier. You, she said, her tone shifting, almost urgent. Your touch. It weakens me. Jace blinked, then grinned. Wait, you're saying I'm your off switch? That's the best news I've heard all day. He dodged another swipe, the claw whistling past his head. So what? I just hugged this thing to death. Not it, she snapped. Me. She grabbed his wrist, her fingers pressing hard against his bare skin where the glove had torn. That tingle came back, stronger now, racing up his arm and into his chest. Zynara gasped again, her skin flushing pinker, the glow in her veins dimming further. The toxins, they fade. Okay, cool, but Jace yanked his arm free as the beast charged again. We're still about to be lunch. He fired a wild shot, then grabbed Zynara's hand and pulled her toward the ledge. Up there now. They scrambled onto the narrow outcrop, the beast's claws scraping the stone below. It reared up, snapping at them, but couldn't reach. Jace panted, clutching his pack. 5 shrooms, 1 alien sidekick, and a pissed-off lizard. This is why I don't take vacations. Zynara stared at him, her breathing uneven. You are reckless, she said, but there was something new in her voice. Curiosity, maybe even respect. Tell me something I don't know? Jace grinned, then sobered. Look, you're not dying on me, and neither's my kid. We got 5 shrooms, enough to split. I take 3 from Mia, you keep 2. Deal. She hesitated, her eyes searching his. Why do you care? Because you didn't let me die down there, Jace said, nodding toward the cave floor where the beast still snarled. And because humans don't quit. We fight, we fix, we figure shit out. You're stuck with me now, glow stick. The beast roared, slamming into the ledge. Cracks spiderwebbed through the stone, and Jace cursed. Okay, time to go. He grabbed her hand again, the tingle flaring but not fading this time. Her skin stayed warm, softer, almost human. She didn't pull away. They bolted for the stairs, the ledge crumbling behind them. The beast's roars faded as they climbed, the glow of the mushrooms lighting their way. At the surface, Jace collapsed against a spire, chest heaving. Well, he panted, holding up his pack. That was a workout. Zynara stood beside him, her hair floating gently now, less wild. You are impossible, she said, her voice softer, almost a whisper in his mind. Yeah, Jace chuckled, meeting her gaze. And you're welcome. He split the shrooms, 3 for Mia, 2 for her, and handed over a share. Truce. She took them, her fingers brushing his. No death, just warmth. Truce, she echoed, and for the first time, her lips curved, just a hint of a smile. Jace smirked. See? Told you humans are stubborn. He stood there, chest still heaving from the chaos of the cave, the red dust of Zynara, 7 clinging to his boots like a jealous ex. The spires around them glowed faintly, casting long, jagged shadows across the cracked ground, and the air buzzed with that low, eerie hum that never seemed to quit. His pack hung heavy on his shoulder, 3 eternal shrooms glowing inside, his ticket to saving Mia. Zynara faced him, her 2 shrooms cradled in her slender hands, her amber eyes piercing through the haze like twin suns. Her skin shimmered with that weird pinkish hue now, a far cry from the lethal purple it had been when they'd met, and her hair floated lazily, catching the light in soft, hypnotic waves. Yeah, stubborn, he repeated, wiping sweat off his brow with the back of his hand. And lucky, apparently, because I'm still breathing after your pet tried to turn me into a chew toy. He flashed her a grin, but it faltered when she didn't respond, just kept staring like she was peeling him apart layer by layer. What? I got something on my face. You are different, Zynara said, her voice a soft vibration in his skull. Less sharp now, more curious. She stepped closer, her bare feet silent against the brittle stone, and Jace caught a whiff of something. Ozone, maybe, mixed with a faint sweetness that didn't belong on this dead rock. You should not be alive. Jace chuckled, shifting his weight. Tell me about it. I've been dodging should-nots my whole life. Crappy ships, bad jobs, worse odds. Yet here I am, chatting up an alien with a mushroom fetish. He patted his pack. Speaking of, we're square, right? 3 for my kid, 2 for you. No hard feelings. Her head tilted, hair rippling like a slow tide. They will sustain me, she said, her fingers brushing the shroom's glowing caps. But not forever. Not forever? Jace's grin faded, replaced by a frown. Wait, hold up. You're saying those 2 won't fix you? What's the expiration date on this deal? The toxins return, she said, her voice steady but laced with something heavy. Resignation, maybe. Your touch delays them, slows them, but they will come back. Jace ran a hand through his hair, pacing a tight circle. Okay, so I'm a Band-Aid, not a cure. That's suboptimal. He stopped, turning to face her. Guess we've got more work to do, huh? Figure out why I'm your walking detox and how to make it stick. Zynara's eyes flickered, narrowing slightly. You would stay? For me? Whoa, slow down, glow stick, Jace said, raising his hands. I'm not moving in. I got a kid to save first. But yeah, I'm not ditching you to rot down here. Call it a human thing. We don't leave people in the lurch, even if they're glowy and kind of terrifying. She didn't smile. Did she even know how? But her posture softened, her hair uncoiling a fraction. You are reckless, she said, echoing her earlier jab. But this time it sounded almost fond, like she was testing the word on her tongue. Reckless, stubborn, charming. Pick your adjective, Jace quipped, slinging his pack higher. Come on, let's get back to the Nomad. I got a med bay and a half-baked plan, and you've got, well, me. Best offer you're going to get today. She followed him through the haze, a silent shadow at his side. The Nomad loomed ahead, its rusty hull a welcome sight against Zyra 7's endless red. Inside, Jace sealed the hatch and yanked off his helmet, sucking in the stale air like it was a luxury. Mia lay in the med bay, her small chest rising and falling under the blue glow of the life support unit. He knelt beside her, brushing her hair back with a gentleness that felt foreign after all the running and fighting. Hey, kiddo, he murmured. Got the goods. Hang in there. Zynara lingered near the cockpit, watching him with that unnerving intensity. She is your purpose, she said, her voice a whisper in his mind. Yeah, Jace said, glancing back. She's my whole damn galaxy. Lost her mom a while back. Rig explosion, bad day. It's just us now. I don't let her down. Zynara's hair shifted, coiling gently. You are bound. Bound, glued, whatever you want to call it, Jace said, standing up. Now, let's save her and uncurse you. Multitasking's my specialty. He grabbed a med kit, pulling out a scanner and his makeshift synthesizer, a Frankenstein mess of wires and scrap metal. These shrooms regenerate cells, right? I'll whip up something for Mia, then we'll play doctor with you. He ground 2 shrooms into a glowing paste, feeding it into the synthesizer. It hummed, spitting out a vial of violet liquid that looked like it belonged in a rave, not a med bay. Jace hesitated, then hooked it to Mia's 4, watching the scanner like a hawk. Her vitals twitched, pulse up, oxygen steady, a faint flush creeping into her cheeks. Holy crap, he breathed, a grin breaking loose. It's working. She's gonna make it. Zynara stepped closer, peering at the screen. She heals. Yeah, Jace said, voice thick with relief. Yeah, she does. He slumped into the pilot's chair, the weight of the last few hours crashing down. Okay, your turn. You've got 2 shrooms, but let's see if I can juice up that detox trick. She set her shrooms on the console, her fingers lingering on them. It is uncertain, she said, her voice faltering. Your touch, it changes me. Then let's change you more, Jace said, holding out his hand, glove off, skin bare. Come on, glow stick. Science time. She hesitated, then reached for him, her fingers brushing his palm. That tingle hit, sharp, warm, racing up his arm like a current. Her skin flushed pinker, the glow in her veins dimming, and she didn't pull away. It retreats, she murmured, her voice trembling in his mind. The poison lessens. Jace grinned, sliding his hand up her arm. See? I'm a miracle worker. Stick with me, and you'll be sipping cocktails on a beach instead of choking on toxins. Her skin was softer now, warm, almost human, and she leaned into his touch, her eyes half closing like she was savoring it. You are impossible, she said, but there was no edge to it, just a quiet awe that made his pulse jump. Impossible's my middle name, Jace quipped, then paused. The air shifted, growing thick, electric like a storm brewing in the cockpit. Zynara stepped closer, her hair brushing his cheek, her breath, warm, alive, tickling his skin. What's happening here? He asked, voice low. I do not know, she said, her voice raw in his skull. But I feel it. Yeah, Jace muttered, his hand sliding to her waist. Me too. He didn't plan it, didn't even think, just leaned in, and her lips met his, soft at first, then hungry. He pulled her against him, her body pressing into his, all warmth and curves where there'd once been cold edges. His hands roamed, her back, her hair, tangling in those floating strands, and she gasped a sharp, desperate sound that lit him up like a flare. They stumbled, hitting the cockpit wall, and Jace's mouth moved to her neck, tasting that ozone sugar mix. Her hands gripped his shoulders, nails digging in, and the tingle turned to fire, burning through them both. Jace, she breathed, his name a jolt in his mind, and he grinned against her skin. Guess I'm your cure now, he panted, pulling back to meet her glowing eyes. You good? Her skin was pink, alive, no trace of poison. I live, she said, her voice breaking with wonder. Good. Jace chuckled, brushing her cheek. Because I'm just getting started. His thumb lingered on Zynara's skin, warm and soft now, a far cry from the icy, toxic barrier it had been hours ago. Her amber eyes glowed faintly in the cockpit's dim light, wide with something between shock and wonder, and her hair floated around her face like a halo caught in zero gravity. Jace's pulse hammered in his ears, louder than the Nomad's engines, and the air between them crackled, thick, charged, like Zyra's Seven's hum had seeped into the ship and wrapped around them. Zynara didn't pull away. She leaned into his touch, her breath hitching, a small, human sound that hit him harder than it should have. I do not understand, she said, her voice trembling in his skull, raw and unguarded. This feeling, Jace grinned, his hand sliding down to her jaw, tilting her face up. Yo, welcome to the mess of being alive, glow stick. It's all downhill from here. He meant it as a joke, but his voice came out rougher than he'd planned, and her eyes locked onto his, searching like she was trying to decode in the way he'd been decoding busted NAV systems for years. She pressed closer, her body brushing his, and Jace felt that fire flare again, sharp, electric, racing from his chest to his fingertips. Her hands slid up his arms, tentative at first, then firm, gripping his shoulders like she needed an anchor. He pulled her in, lips crashing into hers again, and this time it wasn't soft or hesitant. It was hungry, desperate, like they were both chasing something they couldn't name. Her hair tangled around his fingers, soft and alive, and she pressed herself against him, her warmth seeping through his worn-out flight jacket. They stumbled back, hitting the console with a thud that made the controls beep in protest. Jace ignored it, his hands roaming, down her back, over her hips, mapping every inch he could reach. Her skin burned under his touch, not with poison, but with life, and she arched into him, a low sound escaping her throat that sent a jolt straight through him. Jace, she gasped, his name echoing in his mind, sharp and real, and he grinned against her lips. Still here, he panted, pulling back just enough to catch his breath. His hand stayed on her waist, holding her steady, and he studied her. Flushed cheeks, glowing eyes, hair wilder now, like a storm caught in slow motion. You sure you're okay? Because I'm not exactly an expert on alien biology. She nodded, her fingers tightening on his shoulders. I feel, she said, her voice breaking with awe. More than before. Lighter. Free. Jace's grin softened into something real. Good. That's the goal. He brushed a strand of her hair back, marveling at how it moved, like liquid light under his touch. Guess I'm your cure after all. Should I put that on my resume? Jace Carver, pilot, dad, alien detox specialist? Her lips twitched, almost a smile, closer than she'd ever gotten, and she didn't pull away. You are impossible, she said, but there was no bite in it, just a quiet warmth that made his chest ache in a way he hadn't felt since Lena. Yeah, and you're stuck with me, he shot back, leaning his forehead against hers. The tingle was still there, faint now, a steady hum between them, and her skin stayed pink, warm, alive. So what's the verdict? Toxin's gone for good. Or do I need to keep playing doctor? Zynara's eyes fluttered shut, her breathing slowing as if she was testing herself. They are faint, she murmured, her voice a whisper in his mind. Weaker than they have ever been. Faint's a start, Jace said, his hand sliding to the small of her back. We'll get him gone. I don't do half measures. He pulled her closer, and she didn't resist, didn't even hesitate. Just let him hold her, her body fitting against his like it had always belonged there. For a moment, they stayed like that, the cockpit quiet except for the soft hum of the ship and Mia's steady breathing in the med bay. Then Zynara shifted, her hand sliding down his chest, and that fire sparked again, sharper this time. She looked up at him, eyes glowing brighter, and Jace felt his breath catch. What you do to me, she said, her voice raw. It is more than the toxins. Yeah. Jace's grin turned wicked. Well, I've been told I'm a bad influence. He leaned in, kissing her again, slower this time, deeper, savoring the way she melted into him. Her hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him tighter, and the console beeped again, louder like it was jealous. Jace laughed against her lips, breaking away just enough to smack the mute button. Stupid ship, he muttered, ruining the moment. Zynara's head tilted, her hair brushing his cheek. You are distracting, she said, but her tone was softer now, almost playful. Guilty as charged, Jace chuckled, brushing his thumb across her lips. But you're not complaining, right? He didn't wait for an answer, just kissed her again, his hands sliding under her hair, cradling her neck. She pressed into him, her warmth flooding through him, and for a second, he forgot about Zynara, 7, the shrooms, the damn lizard, everything but her. When they finally pulled apart, both panting, Jace rested his forehead against hers, grinning like an idiot. Okay, he said, voice rough. I think we just broke every rule of alien-human contact. How's that for science? Zynara's eyes glowed, her skin flushed and alive. It works, she said, her voice trembling with something new, hope maybe. I am different. Different good, Jace said, brushing her cheek again. Different's alive. He stepped back, reluctantly letting her go, and glanced at Mia's medbay screen. Her vitals were stronger now, pulse steady, color returning. Looks like we're 2 for 2. Kids on the mend, and you're not poisoning me. I'd call that a win. Zynara followed his gaze, her hair settling around her shoulders. You saved her, she said, her voice quiet. And me? Nah, Jace said, waving a hand. Team effort. You didn't snap my neck down there, so I owe you one. He smirked, leaning against the console. Besides, I'm not done with you yet. We've got toxins to kill and a whole planet to figure out. You in? She studied him, her eyes searching his face, then nodded, slow, deliberate. I am in, she said, the words awkward but firm, like she was testing them out. Good, Jace said, clapping his hands together. because I've got a feeling this is just the warm-up. He grabbed his pack, checking the last shroom. Let's get Mia stable, then we'll see how far this detox thing goes. Deal. Deal, Zynara echoed, her lips curving, just a hint, but enough to make Jace's grin widen. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his, and that tingle flared again, warm and steady. All right, glow stick, he said, squeezing her hand back. Let's rewrite the rules of this crazy galaxy, starting with us. Jace leaned against the cockpit console, arms crossed, a smug grin tugging at his lips. The stellar nomad hummed around him, a steady pulse of life in the dead quiet of Zynara 7. Mia's vitals glowed green on the medbay screen, stable, strong, better than they'd been in months. 2 eternal shrooms had done the trick, pumping her full of whatever alien magic made them work. She was still out, curled up under the blue glow of the life support unit, but the color in her cheeks was real now, not just a flicker of hope. Jace let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, relief washing over him like a cold beer after a long haul. Kid's a fighter, he muttered, brushing a hand through his hair. Takes after her old man. He glanced at Zynara, standing near the hatch, her 2 shrooms glowing faintly in her hands. Her skin was still pink, warm, alive, no trace of that lethal purple sheen, and her hair floated lazily, catching the ship's dim light. She looked different, not just less alien, but less guarded, like some wall inside her had cracked. And you're not doing too bad yourself, glow stick, he added, nodding at her. No choking on your own poison yet. I call that progress. Zynara's amber eyes flicked to him, then back to the shrooms. It is temporary, she said, her voice a soft hum in his skull, steady but tinged with something heavy. The toxins are weaker, but they linger. These'll delay them. Nothing more. Jace's grin faltered, his brow furrowing. Delay? Wait, hold up. I thought we were past the maybe you'll die phase. You're saying 2 shrooms aren't enough to fix you. She shook her head, her hair coiling slightly. They sustain me. For a time. But the curse, it is deep. Your touch slows it, but the shrooms are my anchor. Without them, I will fade. Fade, Jace echoed, pushing off the console. You mean die, right? Because that's not on the table, glow stick. We just dodged a lizard and rewrote your biology. I'm not letting you cash out now. He paced a tight circle, mind racing. Okay, we've got 1 shroom left in the pack. I saved it as a backup for Mia, but if you need it... No, Zynara cut in, her voice sharper now, slicing through his skull. She stepped forward, holding her 2 shrooms tighter. Your daughter needs it more. She is fragile. I'm not. Jace stopped, turning to face her. Fragile? Mia's tougher than me, and that's saying something. She's good, 2 did the job. You're the one still playing Russian roulette with your insides. He grabbed the pack, pulling out the last shroom. It glowed faintly in his hand, a tiny beacon of violet light. This one's yours. Take it. Zynara's eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening. I will not, she said, her voice firm. You risked your life for her. I will not take that from you. Oh, come on, Jace groaned, waving the shroom at her. Don't pull the noble sacrifice card on me. I've seen enough vids to know how this ends. Someone's gotta live, and I'm not picking between my kid and you. We're splitting the difference here. He stepped closer, holding it out. Take it, or I'll shove it down your glowy throat myself. She didn't budge, just stared at him, her hair coiling tighter like a warning. You are a fool, she said, but there was no venom in it, just a quiet frustration that made his chest ache. I have lived centuries in this prison. I am not your burden. Centuries? Jace blinked, then whistled low. Damn, you're old. Should have guessed. You've got that wise and cryptic vibe nailed. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. And you're not a burden, all right? You're, I don't know, a partner, a teammate. Whatever this is, we're in it together. So stop acting like you're expendable. Zynara's gaze softened, just a flicker, but enough to make him pause. You do not understand, she said, her voice dropping. There are no more shrooms. The cave is empty. What we have is all that remains. Jace's smirk vanished, his hand tightening around the shroom. Empty? You're sure? She nodded, and he cursed under his breath, pacing again. Okay, that's a problem. 5 shrooms, 2 people, 1 kid who's safe, and 1 alien who's still on the clock. This is why I suck at math. He stopped, running a hand down his face. So, if I give this to you, it's what? Another week? A month? Perhaps, Zynara said, her tone flat. It is uncertain. Uncertain, Jace muttered. Great. My favorite word. He stared at the shroom, its glow mocking him, then at Mia, then back at Zynara. All right, new plan. We take this back to Nexus, get some eggheads to analyze it, grow more. Humans are good at that. Cloning, synthesizing, making shit out of nothing. We'll fix you. Zynara shook her head, her hair uncoiling slightly. There is no time. The toxins will return before you reach your station. I feel them now, faint but growing. Jace's jaw tightened. Then I'll stay. We'll figure out here. I'm not leaving you to fade on this rock. You must, she said, stepping closer, her eyes locking onto his. Your daughter needs you. She is your purpose. And what about you? Jace snapped, his voice rising. You think I can just fly off, knowing you're dying down here because I took your lifeline? That's not how I roll. Glow stick. He held up the shroom, shoving it toward her. Take it. I'll find another way. She grabbed his wrist, her touch warm but firm, and pushed his hand back. That tingle flared again, softer now, and her skin stayed pink, her eyes glowing with something fierce. No, she said, her voice ablaze in his mind. You will go. You will save her. I will find my own path. Jace stared at her, his throat tight. You're a stubborn ass, you know that. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. I learned from you. He laughed, short and bitter, then pulled her into him, wrapping his arms around her. She stiffened at first, then relaxed, her head resting against his chest. Her hair brushed his chin, soft and electric, and he felt her warmth seep into him, chasing away the cold dread in his gut. This isn't over, he muttered into her hair. I'm coming back for you. That's a promise. Zynara pulled back, meeting his gaze. You owe me nothing, she said, but her voice wavered, like she didn't quite believe it. Yeah, well, I'm bad at math and worse at goodbyes, Jace said, forcing a grin. So you're stuck with me, one way or another. He pressed the shroom into her hand, closing her fingers around it. Take it. Buy yourself time. I'll figure out the rest. She didn't argue this time, just nodded, her eyes glowing brighter, like she was holding onto his words as much as the shroom. Jace stepped back, his chest heavy, and turned to the console. All right, Nomad, he said, firing up the engines. Let's get Mia home. The ship rumbled to life, lifting off Zyra 7's surface, and Jace didn't look back. Not because he didn't want to, but because he knew if he did, he'd never leave. The stellar Nomad punched through Zyra 7's thick, red atmosphere, engines roaring as it climbed into the black void beyond. Jace gripped the controls, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack a molar. The viewport showed nothing but dust and stars now. No glowing spires, no alien caves, no Zynara standing there with her last shroom, and that almost smile he couldn't shake from his head. He'd left her behind, not because he wanted to, but because Mia needed him more. At least, that's what he kept telling himself. Stupid glow stick, he muttered, slamming a fist against the console. The NAV screen flickered, beeping in protest, and he glared at it like it was personally responsible for his shitty mood. Couldn't just take the damn shroom and let me play hero, could you? He leaned back in the pilot's chair, running a hand down his face. The cockpit felt too quiet without her voice humming in his skull. Sharp, weirdly comforting, even when she was calling him a fool. He checked Mia's vitals again. Steady, strong, better than they'd been in months. The 2 shrooms had worked a miracle, pumping her full of whatever alien juice made her cells knit back together. She was still out, her small body curled under the med bay's glow, but her breathing was even now. No more of that shallow wheeze that had haunted him for weeks. You're gonna be okay, kiddo, he said, voice rough. Daddy's got you. But Zynara didn't have him. Not anymore. He'd left her with 2 shrooms and a promise, and it felt like a punch to the gut every time he thought about it. Temporary, she'd said. Delay. How long did she have? A week? A month? Less. He didn't know, and that not knowing was eating him alive. He'd flown through asteroid storms, dodged pirates, patched this junker of a ship with spit and hope. Why couldn't he fix this? The Nomad jumped to hyperspace, stars streaking past in a blur of white, and Jace slumped in his seat, staring at the ceiling. Should have stayed, he muttered. Should have dragged her onto the ship, kicked that lizard's ass, found more shrooms, something. But the cave was empty. She'd said it herself. No more glowing miracles hiding down there. Just her, a ticking clock, and a planet that didn't give a damn. He punched the comms, patching in a Nexus station's frequency. "This is Nomad, inbound with a medical priority," he barked, voice clipped. "Kid stable, but needs a full workup. ETA, 6 hours. Don't screw me around." "Copy, Nomad," a bored voice crackled back. "Base 7's open. Med team on standby." Jace cut the feed, leaning his head against the headrest. 6 hours to Nexus. 6 hours to get me a safe. And then what? Fly back to Zynara. 7 with nothing but a prayer and a plasma pistol? He snorted, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Yeah, real genius plan, Carver. Charge in, save the day, hope she's not a corpse by the time you get there." The last shroom sat in his pack, glowing faintly through the fabric. He'd kept it for Mia, just in case, but she didn't need it now. Zynara did. He could have forced it on her, made her take it, bought her more time. But she'd pushed him away, stubborn as hell, and he'd let her. "Dumbass," he muttered, kicking the console. "Should have fought harder." The hours dragged. Jace paced, checked Mia, fiddled with the controls, anything to keep his mind off Zynara. But she was there, stuck in his head like a glitch he couldn't reboot. That kiss in the cockpit, hot, messy, real, kept replaying, her voice echoing Jace in that raw, desperate way that made his chest tight. She wasn't just some alien he'd stumbled across. She was something else. Something he couldn't leave behind. Not really. Nexus Station loomed ahead, a sprawling mess of lights and steel orbiting a dull gray moon. The Nomad docked with a groan, and Jace carried Mia out, her weight light but solid in his arms. The med team swarmed him. White coats, scanners, questions he barely answered. "Radiation damage. Reversed," one doc said, frowning at his tablet. "No trace of cell decay. This shouldn't be possible." "Yeah, well, add it to the list," Jace snapped, setting Mia on a stretcher. "Just keep her stable. I've got places to be." The doc blinked. "You're leaving? She's your kid, and she's safe now." Jace cut in, already backing toward the bay door. "I'll be back. Got a debt to pay." He didn't wait for a reply, just bolted for the Nomad, his boots clanging against the metal deck. Inside, he fired up the engines, the last shroom still glowing in his pack. "Hang on, glow stick," he muttered, locking in Zynara 7's coordinates. "I'm not done being stubborn yet." The ship lurched, pulling away from Nexus, and Jace stared at the stars, his jaw set. He didn't have a plan, not a good one, anyway, but he'd figure it out. He always did. The jump back was faster, or maybe he just felt that way with his foot jammed on the throttle. Zynara 7's red haze filled the viewport again, and Jace's stomach twisted as he guided the Nomad down. The spires glowed through the dust, same as before, but the silence felt heavier now, like the planet knew something he didn't. He landed near the crevasse, grabbing his pistol and the shroom, and sprinted out. "Zynara," he yelled, his voice echoing off the stone as he slid down the steps. The cave was dimmer now, the walls pulsing slower, like a heartbeat winding down. She was there, slumped against a rock, her hair limp, her skin fading back to a faint purple. Her eyes fluttered open, amber dim but alive, and she stared at him, stunned. "You came back," she rasped, her voice weak in his mind. "Told you I'm stubborn," Jace said, kneeling beside her. He held up the shroom, pressing it into her hand. "Take it. No arguments." She shook her head, pushing it back. "Your daughter is fine," Jace cut in, his voice fierce. "You're not. Take it, or I'll shove it down your throat myself." Her lips twitched, barely a smile, and she took it, her fingers trembling as she pressed it to her chest. The glow flared, seeping into her, and her skin shifted, pink again, stronger. She exhaled, a shuddering breath, and Jace pulled her into his arms, holding tight. Not losing you, he muttered into her hair. Not today. Jace held Zynara tight, her warmth seeping into him as the cave's dim glow pulsed around them. Her skin was pink again, vibrant under the faint light of the last eternal shroom she'd pressed to her chest. The violet glow had faded into her, chasing away that sickly purple hue, and her breathing steadied against him, slow, real, alive. Her hair brushed his cheek, soft and electric, and for a moment he just stayed there, knees digging into Zynara 7's cold stone, letting the relief sink in. She wasn't fading. Not yet. Zynara shifted, pulling back just enough to meet his gaze. Her amber eyes glowed brighter now, sharp with something he couldn't quite name, gratitude, maybe, or disbelief. You returned, she said, her voice a soft hum in his skull, stronger than it had been minutes ago. Why? Jace grinned, brushing a thumb across her cheek. Told you I'm bad at goodbyes, glow stick. Plus, I'm not big on leaving people to die on creepy alien planets. It's a character flaw. He stood, hauling her up with him, and steadied her when she wobbled. You good? Because I'm not carrying you back to the ship. My back's already mad at me. Her lips twitched, closer to a smile than he'd ever seen, and she straightened, her hair uncoiling slightly. I am stable, she said, testing the word. The shroom delays it. Delays. Jace echoed, his grin fading. Still not a fix, huh? He ran a hand through his hair, pacing a tight circle. Okay, new game plan. We're not playing whack-a-mole with your toxins anymore. I'm getting you off this rock, and we're figuring this out permanently. Zynara's eyes narrowed. You would take me with you? Yeah, why not? Jace shrugged, slinging his pack over his shoulder. Mia's safe at Nexus. I've got a ship that's mostly functional, and you're not exactly a threat anymore. Unless you're planning to poison me mid-flight, which be a real buzzkill. He smirked, but his tone softened. Seriously, glow stick. You're not staying here alone. Come with me. She hesitated, her gaze flicking to the cave walls, then back to him. This is my prison, she said, her voice quiet. I have known nothing else. Then it's time for a jailbreak, Jace said, holding out his hand. Come on. Humans are good at busting out of bad spots, trust me. She studied his hand, then took it, her fingers warm against his. That tingle flared, faint, steady, and Jace squeezed back, pulling her toward the stairs. Let's roll, he said, leading her up and out into Zynara 7's red haze. The Nomad waited, its rusty hull a stubborn blot against the dust, and Jace couldn't help but grin as he sealed the hatch behind them. Welcome aboard, Glowstick. Don't touch anything. I'm still paying off the last repair bill. The flight back to Nexus was quick, the stars streaking past in a blur. Jace kept one eye on the controls and the other on Zynara, who sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring at the viewport like she'd never seen space before. First time off the planet? He asked, nudging her with his elbow. Yes, she said, her voice soft in his mind. I was bound to Zynara 7. Well, you're free now, Jace said, punching in the docking codes. Stick with me, and I'll show you the galaxy, or at least the parts that don't shoot at me on sight. Nexus Station swallowed the Nomad into Bay 7, and Jace bolted for the med bay the second the hatch opened. Mia was awake, sitting up, her dark hair messy, her eyes bright as she spotted him. Dad, she squeaked, lunging into his arms. Hey, kiddo, Jace laughed, hugging her tight. Told you I'd fix it. He pulled back, grinning. You feeling okay? Yeah, she said, nodding fast. The doctors said I'm all better. They kept asking about some glowy stuff, but I didn't know what they meant. Jace chuckled, ruffling her hair. Long story. I'll tell you later. He glanced over his shoulder. Zynara stood in the bay door, her hair floating, her pink skin stark against the station's sterile white. Mia followed his gaze, her eyes widening. Who's she? Mia asked, tilting her head. That's Zynara, Jace said, waving her over. She's a friend. Help me save you. Mia hopped off the stretcher, peering up at Zynara. You're pretty, she said, blunt as only an 8-year-old could be. Are you an alien? Zynara blinked, her hair coiling slightly. Yes, she said, her voice echoing faintly in Jace's mind. I am not from here. Cool, Mia grinned, unfazed. Dad says aliens are just grumpy glow sticks. Are you grumpy? Jace snorted, covering his mouth. Zynara's eyes flicked to him, narrowing. Your father is reckless, she said, but her tone was softer now, almost playful. See? Told you she's a friend, Jace said, clapping Zynara's shoulder. Come on, let's get out of here. I've got a plan brewing. The next few days were a blur. Jace dragged Mia and Zynara back to Zynara, 7, not to abandon her, but to build something. He'd patched into Nexus's black market comms again, trading favors for a crate of scrap metal, a portable generator, and a half-broken bioreplicator he swore he could fix. Humans don't quit, he told Zynara, hauling the gear out of the Nomad's cargo hold. We adapt. We're going to make this work. He set up camp near the crevasse, the spires glowing overhead as he hammered together a crude shelter. Nothing fancy, just walls and a roof to keep out the dust. Mia ran around, chasing the faint lights flickering in the haze, while Zynara watched, her hair floating gently. Why? She asked one night, sitting beside him as he tinkered with the replicator. Why what? Jace grunted, wrenching a bolt into place. Why stay? She said, her voice quiet. You could leave. Take her. Be safe. Jace paused, wiping grease off his hands. Because safe's boring, he said, smirking. And because you're part of this now. Mia's alive because of you. I'm alive because of you. We don't ditch family, glow stick. Her eyes widened, glowing brighter. Family, yeah, Jace said, nudging her. You're stuck with us. Deal with it. She didn't argue, just sat there, her hand brushing his, that tingle flaring warm and steady. The replicator hummed to life, and Jace fed it a shroom scraping, tweaking the settings. Days turned into weeks, the shelter growing into a small outpost. Walls reinforced, a makeshift lab where he and Zynara tested the replicator. It worked, slowly, spitting out tiny, glowing shroom clones. Not enough to flood the galaxy, but enough to keep her stable. One night, they sat outside, the red dust settled, the stars peeking through Zynara 7's haze. Mia slept inside, and Jace leaned back, Zynara beside him, her hand resting on his. So he said, grinning, alien cure, kids saved, and a house on a dead planet. Not bad for a screw-up pilot, huh? You are persistent, Zynara said, her lips curving, just a hint but real. Damn right, Jace chuckled, squeezing her hand. And we're just getting started. The night air on Zynara 7 was cool for once. The red dust settled into a thin haze that softened the glow of the spires around their little outpost. The stars peeked through the planet's murky sky, faint but stubborn, like they were rooting for him. Zynara sat beside him, her hand warm in his, her hair floating gently in the stillness. The generator hummed in the background, a steady heartbeat for their makeshift home, and the bioreplicators faint were promised more shrooms. Slowly, sure, but enough to keep her going. Jace leaned back against the shelter's wall, grinning like a kid who'd just pulled off a heist. Gotta say, he mused, tilting his head toward her, I didn't picture my life ending up with a kid, an alien, and a DIY mushroom farm on a dead planet. But here we are, making it work. Humans, ooh, we're like cockroaches, stick us anywhere, and we'll build a bar. Zynara's lips curved, just a hint, but it was there, a real smile this time, not just a twitch. You are resilient, she said, her voice a soft hum in his skull, warm and steady. I did not think such a thing possible. Yeah, well, we're full of surprises, Jace said, nudging her with his elbow. Give us a problem, and we'll duct tape it till it cries uncle. Speaking of, he nodded toward the replicator, its tiny shroom clones glowing faintly in their makeshift lab. Those little guys are our ticket to keeping you toxin-free. Slow going, but we'll scale it up. Maybe even sell them on the black market. Glowstick's miracle cure, patent pending. Her eyes flickered, glowing brighter in the dim light. You'd stay here? For this. For you. Jace corrected, his grin softening. And Mia, this isn't just about shrooms, glow stick. It's about not leaving people behind. You're part of the crew now. Deal with it. He squeezed her hand again, that tingle flaring warm and familiar, and she didn't pull away, just sat there, her gaze locked on his like she was seeing him for the first time. The shelter door creaked open, and Mia poked her head out, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Dad?" she mumbled, her hair a mess of tangles. "Why were you still up?" Jace chuckled, waving her over. "Just plotting world domination, kiddo. The usual." "See, Mia." She shuffled out, barefoot on the dusty ground, and plopped down beside him, leaning into his side. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "You good?" "Yeah," Mia said, yawning. "The doctor said I'm all fixed. No more glowy stuff in me." She glanced at Zynara, tilting her head. "Are you staying forever?" Zynara blinked, her hair coiling slightly. "Do not know," she said, her voice soft in Jace's mind, echoing faintly for Mia too. "This is new." "Well, you should," Mia said, matter of fact. "Dad says you're cool, and he doesn't say that about lots of people. Right, Dad?" Jace snorted, ruffling her hair. "Right, kid. Zynara's the coolest alien stepmom in the galaxy. Don't tell her I said that, though. She'll get a big head." Zynara's eyes narrowed, but that smile flickered again, wider now. "You are impossible," she said, her tone teasing, a far cry from the cold warnings she'd thrown at him back in the cave. "Guilty," Jace grinned, leaning back. "But you love it. Admit it." She didn't answer, just squeezed his hand back, her warmth seeping into him, and that was enough. Mia giggled, snuggling closer, and for a moment, the three of them just sat there, a weird little family under Zyra 7's hazy sky. The outpost wasn't much: scrap walls, a leaky roof, a lab that smelled like burnt circuits, but it was theirs, a speck of defiance against a planet that had tried to kill them all. The replicator beeped, spitting out another shroom clone, and Jay stood, stretching. "All right, crew," he said, clapping his hands. "Time to level up. Mia, you're on quality control. Make sure these glow right. Zynara, you're with me. We're tweaking this thing till it pumps out shrooms like a candy machine." Mia hopped up, darting to the lab, while Zynara followed him, her step silent but sure. Inside, the replicator hummed, its tiny shrooms glowing in neat rows. Jace tinkered with the settings, muttering curses at the wiring, and Zynara watched, her hair brushing his arm as she leaned in. "You believe this will work?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Believe? Yotsechaikrod. Ranchino Bortlos. Nah, I know it will. Humans don't mess around when it comes to survival. We'll make enough to keep you kicking, then figure out the rest. Maybe even fix this dump of a planet while we're at it." Her hand brushed his, lingering, and that tingle flared again, warm, steady, a promise. "You are persistent," she said, her smile real now, unguarded. "Damn right," Jace said, meeting her gaze. "And I'm not stopping till you're free, really free. No more curses, no more caves. Just you, me, and Mia, kicking ass across the stars." She nodded, her eyes glowing bright, and they worked together, tweaking, testing, laughing when the replicator spat out shroom that looked more like a lump than a cure. Hours blurred into days, the outpost growing, solar panels patched from scrap, a water recycler Jace rigged from old pipes, a bunk for Mia with a star chart pinned above it. Zyra 7 wasn't dead anymore. Not to them. It was home, rough and raw, but theirs. One night, weeks later, they sat outside again, the dust settled, the stars clearer now through the thinning haze. Mia pointed at constellations, chattering about names she'd made up: Dragon's Tail, Big Spoon. And Jace listened, his arm around Zynara. Her hand rested on his knee, warm and sure, and he grinned, leaning into her. "So," he said, voice low, "still think I'm a fool?" "Yes," she said, her voice teasing in his mind. "But a good one." Jace laughed, loud and free, and pulled her closer, kissing her temple. "Good enough for me, glow stick." The nomad sat nearby, engines quiet, a rusty sentinel against the red. The replicator hummed inside, pumping out shrooms, slow, steady, a lifeline. Zyra 7 wasn't a prison anymore. Not for her, not for them. It was a start, a speck of hope carved out of ruin, proof that humans could take a dead world and make it sing. And as the stars shone down, Jace knew one thing for sure. They'd keep going, together, because that's what humans did best.